Those who will not live by the law shall die by the law.
Welcome to Shaman Vision. Today we have a groundbreaking revelation that an ancient Egyptian pharaoh's hymn has made it into the Hebrew Bible. And this isn't just any ancient Egyptian pharaoh, it is the most polarizing pharaoh we have on the record, Pharaoh Akhenaten. We have always known that the Bible and Israel had close ties with ancient Egypt. Professor of Muslim-Christian relations at Rhodes College, John Kaltner expounds on this by saying, quote, Egypt is mentioned in the Hebrew Bible almost 700 times and is referred to another 25 times in the New Testament, making it the most frequently mentioned place outside of Canaan in the Bible. In biblical times, Egypt was already an ancient civilization and the pyramids were thousands of years old. Israel's status as a relative newcomer can be seen in the fact that many of the events described in the Hebrew Bible are set in an era now known as the New Kingdom, which was the most recent of the major periods of ancient Egyptian history. Many would find it interesting to know that an ancient Egyptian hymn found its way into the Hebrew Bible. Before we dive in, first, let's get a little background. Pharaoh Akhenaten reigned in the 18th dynasty in what's called the Amarna period. Akhenaten is a very interesting and polarizing character. He changed and redefined ancient Egyptian art and religion, proving himself to be a real cultural revolutionary. His innovative and unique ideas have managed to trickle their way down to the modern era through the monotheistic religions of Judaism, Islam, and Christianity. Monotheism is the belief that there is only one God. This theology is the cornerstone to the most powerful religions of this day, and this concept was first seen in ancient Egypt with Akhenaten. This does not mean he was the first person to ever believe that there was only one God, but he is the first person we have on the historical record. Though the belief in one God is popular today, it seemed heretical and insane in the pagan world, where the concept of many divinities was seen as an absolute fact. Akhenaten's concept of the one God was symbolized by the sun and referred to as the Aten. Traditionally, the pharaohs in Egypt were seen as a god or an incarnation of a god, but Akhenaten positioned himself more like a prophet, with the mission of spreading his gospel of the one true and all-powerful God. Keep in mind, monotheism is a popular idea today, but Akhenaten was hated for this idea and his beliefs. Even though he was pharaoh, he received a lot of pushback from the powerful priestly class of Egypt. He was so hated, in fact, by the political elite that there was an active effort to completely erase him from history. So now that we have a little background and context, let's look at this hymn that made it into Psalms 104 in the Bible. I'll be referencing an article from Jewish author Aaron Koller. He is a professor of Near Eastern Studies at Yeshiva University. This article is titled Psalms 104 and its parallels in Pharaoh Akhenaten's hymn. As we get into this, I want to bring up the point that the connection between the two texts has been known about for a while. Professor Koller mentions in his article, quote, the American Egyptologist James Henry Breasted, who wrote his dissertation in Germany on Pharaoh Akhenaten, drew attention more than a century ago to striking parallels between the great hymn and Psalm 104. A close comparison shows that there are a large number of shared motifs in the same order, including some motifs that are not found anywhere else in the Bible. Given that the hymn is earlier than Psalms, this would then be a clear case of borrowing by one of the biblical authors. Let's look at some of these parallels. The parallels begin with the theme of darkness and its association with beast, more specifically lions. It's followed up by the motif of the sun, a dawn of a new day where humans awake and begin to work. This concept of the duality between night and day fits perfectly with Akhenaten's theology of the sun being a symbol of the Creator. And I stress the word symbol. For him, the sun acted as an astronomical symbol for his creator, not to be worshipped literally, similar to the Christian cross, Jewish menorah, and Islamic Quran. Here is one of the most clear and powerful parallels in my opinion. We have almost word for word, "How many are your deeds, O Lord?" in Psalms. In Akhenaten's version, "How many are your deeds, though hidden from sight, O sole God besides whom there is none?" What's interesting with this quote is that the theology is much more developed and advanced in the earlier text, which is Akhenaten's hymn. The theology is expressed by saying, "O sole God besides whom there is none," which is an extremely monotheistic view. And this isn't a view that ancient Israelites took until much later. If you really start studying the Bible and getting a more academic understanding of it, you realize that the ancient Jews started off as henotheists, where they were loyal to their God but acknowledged the existence of other gods. This idea then evolved to the God of Israel was more powerful than any other god, and finally ending up as there is only one God, and that is the God of Israel. So you can see a clear development and evolution. But we see here the earlier text, and what I believe to be the inspiration has that deep, intrinsic, pure monotheism embedded into it from the start. And I think that's a very important point. Another side point is, this obviously is an interpretation, an English translation of the Egyptian text. But "O sole God besides whom there is none" sounds very Islamic. That type of language is used a lot in Islam with that really pure monotheism. So, we can see a really clear connection right there. This is a great parallel and an excellent example of the point I've set out to prove. Beyond that, we have the other motif in the same verse expressing how God created the earth and filled it with his creations. This is all very interesting. And now we have the theme of God looking after man and giving him his just due, providing him with food to eat, supplying our needs, another really clear connection and parallel. You might be like, "These aren't word for word, these don't look exactly the same." And that's because they're not, and they're not supposed to be. The biblical version has been through a long process of expansion and refinement. We have to remember that these texts were written hundreds of years apart and in different languages. To understand this, we must put it in context. The evidence indicates that the early or proto-Israelites remembered and loved this story. They preserved it even after they left Egypt and placed it in their own oral tradition. As time evolved, so did the hymn. They adjusted it and personalized it to fit more into their evolving views. Yet the hymn is still preserved clear enough that we can still see the original inspiration today, thousands of years later. That truly is amazing and a testament to Akhenaten and his paradigm-shifting ideas. And to me, this makes a substantial case that Akhenaten's monotheistic theology was the precursor of and directly connected to the modern-day Abrahamic religions, which all branch off of ancient Judaism and in turn, Akhenaten. This has theological grounds in the Quran. Surah An-Nahl states, "We sent a messenger to every community, saying, 'Worship God and shun false gods.' Among them were some God-guided, misguidance took hold of others." This implies, since there have been a vast number of communities that have existed, that the messengers couldn't all be named in the Quran. Could Akhenaten be one of these unnamed messengers? The parallels between these two texts are very interesting. Scholars agree there is a connection, but differ on why the connections exist. Most think it's clear Akhenaten's hymn influenced the story. Some think they're both pulling from a Near Eastern writing style, and that explains the connection, while others think it was the Israelites that influenced Akhenaten. The latter scenario I see as the least likely for multiple reasons. This is not the only connection we see with the Egyptian and later Abrahamic religions. We have the 42 laws of Ma'at, from which we get the first 10 commandments. We have the concept of the Trinity with Osiris, Isis, and Horus. The idea of the dying and resurrecting God with Osiris. Ritual circumcision, prayer techniques, ritual purification, and much more. And really, this comes as no surprise. If you study the Bible, you realize that Egypt has a profound presence throughout the Old and New Testament. Like I mentioned earlier, Egypt is brought up more than 700 times in the Bible. Egypt was thought of as a kingdom with great power that sometimes acted as an oppressive force, like the story of Exodus, or as a place to seek refuge, like the stories of the prophets Abraham, Joseph, Jesus, etc. Historically, The evidence shows that Egypt operated more as a place of refuge than it did as a place of oppression. I say that because we do have archaeological evidence of a historical person who acted in a similar fashion to Joseph in the Bible narrative. This historical figure was Apriel, vizier to Akhenaten and his father. This discovery does add credibility to the story of Joseph and the positive relationship between Egypt and the early Israelites. I plan on doing a second part to this video, focusing on Apriel, as he is an extremely fascinating and important figure when it comes to the connection between ancient Egypt and Israel. On the other hand, there is no evidence at all that suggests there was an exodus like described in the Bible. But just because we haven't found evidence of it doesn't mean it never happened. It might just have been a historical event that went down a little different than the biblical story. Or some think this is a prophecy yet to come true. I have a working theory that I'm going to explore and try to prove in a series of videos. That ancient Egypt, aka Kemet, is the cornerstone of all Abrahamic religions, as well as Greek philosophy, alchemy, chemistry, mathematics, and advanced construction methods. I will be standing on the backs of intellectual giants, as well as modern scholars, to make a model proving this claim. With all this being said, I have deep love and respect for all the spiritual traditions I've mentioned. I'm just seeking the truth. Thanks for watching. Peace.